I've never been an outdoors person. Even now, the idea of sleeping on the ground, surrounded by insects and strange nighttime noises, makes my skin crawl. When I was younger, though, I didn't have much of a choice. My dad was obsessed with camping. Every summer, without fail, he'd pack up the truck and drag me into the woods with a group of his equally outdoorsy friends. They called it disconnecting from technology. To me, it felt more like voluntary suffering. By the time I was halfway through high school, I had reached my limit. I finally convinced him to let me bring a friend along on one of these trips. If I was going to be miserable, at least I wouldn't be alone. That friend was Charles. Charles was the exact opposite of me. He loved camping. He'd been a Boy Scout, knew how to start fires, tie knots, and survive in the woods if civilization collapsed tomorrow. Surprisingly, though, he wasn't smug about it. He teased me a little, but he wasn't cruel. When my dad agreed to let him come, I thought the trip might actually be tolerable for once. That optimism didn't last long. One of my dad's friends had messed up the campsite reservation. Instead of a quiet, isolated patch of wilderness, we arrived at a heavily developed campground. Paved paths, indoor bathrooms, even a playground for kids. It felt less like camping and more like sleeping in a parking lot with trees. My dad was furious, but the real shock came later that evening. Right next to the campground, close enough that you could hear it, was a full-blown amusement park. Roller coasters, a Ferris wheel, carnival games, bright signs towering above the tree line. It felt wrong, like two worlds that were never meant to exist side by side. There was no turning back. We'd driven hours to get there, and my dad refused to admit defeat. So we set up camp. Charles, of course, took charge. Our tent went up flawlessly. The knots were perfect. The stakes were solid. Even my dad seemed impressed, which annoyed me more than I'd like to admit. Later that night, Charles and I ducked into the woods under the excuse of organizing our gear. In reality, he'd brought weed and a small pipe, and we figured this was our chance to relax a bit. Afterward, we lay in the tent talking, wide awake, restless. That's when Charles grinned and said, "You want to explore?" At first, I thought he meant the campground. Then he nodded toward the distant silhouette of the roller coasters. Sneaking into the amusement park after midnight sounded stupid. It also sounded thrilling. The kind of bad idea that feels unforgettable. So we waited until the adults were asleep, grabbed our flashlights, and slipped out. The fence around the park was easy to climb. Too easy. Inside, the park was eerily silent. No music, no laughter, just empty rides and shadowed buildings. Every so often, we heard the low hum of a security cart moving somewhere in the distance. We moved slowly, hiding whenever we had to. My heart was pounding the entire time. Eventually, we reached the base of one of the roller coasters. Up close, it looked massive, a dark metal skeleton rising into the night sky. We spotted a maintenance staircase running alongside the track and started climbing. Each step echoed softly. The higher we went, the more exposed it felt. At the top, the view was surreal. The entire park spread out beneath us, frozen and lifeless. We snapped one quick photo and decided not to push our luck. On the way back, something changed. As we hid behind a snack stand waiting for a guard to pass, I noticed movement in the darkness. At first, I thought it was just shadows. Then Charles grabbed my arm. Someone else was there. About 30 feet away, crouched between two buildings, was a figure watching us. They weren't wearing a uniform. They weren't a kid. And they were moving the same way we were, careful, deliberate, hiding. When the figure darted across a patch of light, my stomach dropped. It was a man. His clothes were torn. His posture was wrong, like he was injured. And smeared across his face was something dark and wet. Blood. The guard finally passed, and we didn't waste another second. We ran. We didn't laugh when we cleared the fence. We didn't talk when we got back to the tent. We just lay there, staring at the fabric ceiling, trying to convince ourselves it had been nothing. The next morning, park staff went tent to tent. A man had been murdered nearby the night before. The suspect was still on the loose. They described him as disheveled, possibly injured, possibly covered in blood. Charles and I didn't say a word. To this day, I regret that silence. I was 16 years old when it happened, and even now, years later, October still makes me uneasy. Back in 2016, The whole clown craze was everywhere. Social media was flooded with videos and blurry photos of people dressed as clowns standing near forests, highways, or playgrounds. Most of it felt fake, just people chasing attention, but every now and then a real incident slipped through. Something genuinely disturbing. At the time, I laughed it off like everyone else. I never thought I'd become part of it. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I remember that clearly because Wednesdays were always exhausting. 7 classes straight, barely any breaks. When the final bell rang, I said quick goodbyes to my friends and headed for the subway like I'd done hundreds of times before. The train platform was quieter than usual. Not empty, but close to it. A few people scattered along the benches, staring at their phones, lost in their own worlds. I boarded the train, found a seat, and immediately put my headphones in. Music up loud, brain off. I was flipping through chemistry flashcards on my phone, barely paying attention to anything around me. Looking back, I cringe at how careless I was. Headphones in, eyes down, alone. But when you repeat the same routine every day, you stop seeing danger. My stop was 96th Street. When the train slowed down, I stood up automatically. Muscle memory took over. I moved toward the doors without even looking up, still focused on my phone. The doors slid open, and I walked straight into something solid. I looked up. There was a clown standing directly in the doorway. Not a half-hearted costume, not a cheap mask. This was full commitment. Baggy, brightly colored pants, oversized shirt, red suspenders stretched across his chest, giant red shoes planted firmly on the ground. His face was covered in thick white makeup, with exaggerated red lips and blue shapes painted above his eyes. The only thing missing was the wig. For a second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. It felt unreal, like a prank video playing out in real life. He didn't say anything. He didn't move. He just stood there, blocking the exit. People always say fear hits instantly, but that's not true. At first, I was just confused. My ears were still filled with music. The world felt muted, disconnected. Then I noticed his eyes. They weren't playful. They weren't joking. They were locked onto me with a focus that made my stomach tighten. I realized the doors would close in a few seconds. I tried to step around him. The moment my shoulder brushed against his chest, he moved. In one smooth motion, he leaned down toward my face like he wanted to make sure I saw him clearly. Like he wanted to be remembered. That's when panic finally kicked in. I shoved past him and ran. I barely made it off the train before the door slid shut behind me. My feet hit the platform hard, and I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just ran. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Fast. Heavy. Too close. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The clown was chasing me. The platform was nearly empty. No one close enough to help. No one close enough to even notice. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was shaking my vision. Something about the way he ran was wrong. His movements were jerky, uneven, like his limbs didn't quite work the way they should. But what froze my blood wasn't his stride. It was his hand. He was holding a knife. It looked like a kitchen knife, long blade, catching the overhead lights as he ran. I have no idea where he'd been hiding it. All I knew was that he had it now, and he was gaining on me. I ran for the stairs. My lungs burned. My legs felt like lead. I could hear his shoes slapping against the concrete behind me, echoing through the station. Every step felt like it might be my last. I took the stairs 2 at a time, nearly tripping more than once. I burst out onto the street, gasping for air, and didn't stop until I saw people. Real people. Normal people. I screamed. Someone called the police. By the time officers arrived and went down to the platform, the clown was gone. They took my statement, asked me what he looked like, asked if I was sure about the knife. I nodded through all of it, shaking so badly I could barely stand. They told me I was safe. But fear doesn't listen to logic. For weeks after that, every subway ride felt like a gamble. Every crowded platform made my chest tighten. Every person in a costume, even harmless ones, sent a jolt of panic through me. Nothing else ever happened. No follow-up. No arrest. No explanation. Sometimes I wonder if he picked me at random or if he'd been watching me before I ever noticed him. Either way, I still avoid that station whenever I can. And every October, When people joke about creepy clowns, I stay quiet, because I know some of them are real. I was a little over 2 years out of college when this happened, stuck in that uncomfortable phase of life where you're technically educated but still broke. I was taking an online graduate certificate just to feel productive, but most of my time was spent bouncing between random jobs. Delivery apps, short contracts, anything that paid. Indeed became my nightly routine. One evening, while scrolling half asleep, a job listing caught my attention. It was for a lifeguard position at a hotel a few towns away. At first glance, it looked normal enough. Hotels have pools. Pools need lifeguards. But the details were off. The hours were strange. Not morning to evening like you'd expect. They wanted someone from late afternoon until after midnight. A night shift for a swimming pool. Then there was the requirement that really stopped me. The listing specifically asked for someone who did not speak Spanish. That didn't sit right with me. I grew up speaking Spanish. My mother only spoke Spanish. And the town where the hotel was located was predominantly Spanish-speaking. The request made no sense. But then I saw the pay. $30 an hour. For where I was in life. That number erased most of my doubts. I told myself I'd just pretend I didn't know Spanish. How would they even know? To my surprise, I got a response the same night and was scheduled for an interview the next day. When I arrived at the hotel, it looked ordinary. Nothing fancy. Nothing sketchy on the surface. A stocky man greeted me outside with a big smile and handshake. He joked around, asked about my certifications, and made the place feel welcoming. Then another man appeared. He was taller, broader, and his expression never softened. The moment he saw me, I felt like I was being evaluated, studied. He walked straight up to me and started speaking in Spanish. Casually, calmly. I froze inside, but I forced my face to stay blank. I stared at him like I didn't understand a word. After a few seconds, the first man burst out laughing, and the taller one followed. They told me it was just a joke. I didn't laugh. They explained the job as we walked toward the pool. They planned to open the pool to non-guests at night for a fee. My job was to lifeguard, collect money, and call management if anything went wrong. There was one extra rule. If anyone showed me a blue wristband, I was to unlock a large building behind the pool they referred to as the pool house. I didn't ask questions. That was my first mistake. The first few weeks were uneventful. Busy but normal. People came and went. I collected cash. No wristbands. Then one night, a man approached me wearing sunglasses even though it was dark. He didn't speak English. He showed me the blue band. I unlocked the door. An hour later, he left. His backpack looked heavier. After that, more wristbands appeared, sometimes multiple people at once. At the same time, the pool started filling up with non-guests who paid far more than the posted price. Some of them overpaid by ridiculous amounts. When I called to ask about it, management told me not to worry and hung up quickly. That's when the truth hit me. This wasn't about swimming. Money was being moved, cleaned, hidden in plain sight. The pool was a front. From that point on, I couldn't unsee it. Conversations whispered in Spanish. Frequent trips into the locked building. People treating me like I was part of something bigger. They started tipping me, greeting me by name, slap on my back. It felt good, and that scared me more than anything. One evening, a child slipped into the deep end and started drowning. I jumped in without thinking and pulled him out. The entire pool erupted in applause. Later, one of the men pulled me aside and thanked me. That child was his son. The next day, they greeted me with drinks and celebration. Someone gave a toast in Spanish. I understood every word. They were celebrating profit and damage. That was the moment I knew I needed to leave. But I didn't. Not yet. The final straw came when my mother called me during my shift. I stepped away to take it. I spoke Spanish without thinking. When I turned around, the tall man was standing there, watching. He asked how long I'd spoken Spanish. I lied. He stared at me for what felt like forever. Then he smiled and walked away. Before my shift ended, he told me to come in early the next day. Said he had another opportunity for me. He slipped a few $100s into my hand. I never went back. I don't know what would have happened if I had. But I know this, whatever they were running out of that hotel, I was never meant to understand it. And the moment they realized I did, I would have disappeared.